Hello and welcome to What If Indonesia Won World War I in Altscen Mapping's What If Civilization Started Over series. But before I begin, if you like this video, please like and subscribe as it would help me out a lot. But anyway, before World War I starts, I will need to change two things, as in our timeline it would have been incredibly difficult for Indonesia to win as they were fighting some of the strongest countries in the world. The first thing I changed is that in the regular timeline Sweden lost first place to Galicia in the power rankings just before the war started, but in this timeline, Sweden invested more into their military, which means that they stay number one in the power rankings for longer. The second thing I changed is that in our timeline South China joined the triangles just days before Indonesia was going to invade them, but in this timeline, India didn't give South India their ultimatum fast enough, which means Indonesia was able to invade and annex them easily. Other than the two things I changed, the rest of the build-up to World War I will be the same, with Indonesia killing Bangladesh's king, and this eventually leads to World War I, except instead of India attacking Indonesia first, it's actually the other way around, as Indonesia figures out about India's plans and attacks them first. On the Bengal front, both Vietnam and Myanmar, with Indonesia's help, are able to push into Bangladesh and get pretty close to their capital. Meanwhile in India, Indonesia, through the act of surprise and them also stationing troops in their colonies in advance, is able to push pretty far into India, taking 3 major cities and even the capital of one of their puppet states. In Africa, Indonesia doesn't do as well because almost all of Indonesia's most qualified troops were put on the front line with India. This means that in the more southern part of Indonesia's African colony, their military, even after taking 2 major cities, is eventually bogged down thanks to Mozambique and Indian troops using guerrilla warfare. In the northern part of Indonesia's colony, it goes even worse for them, as Somalian soldiers are way more used to the conditions of the Horn of Africa than Indonesia's troops, so even with early Indonesian gains in the south, Somalia is still able to break through Indonesian lines in the north and even endanger 2 Indonesian major cities. In Australia it does go a little bit better for Indonesia, because India's Australian colony is undermanned, which allows Indonesia to make some pretty good gains, even if they are eventually stalemated on the Australian coast. However, now that India is beginning to fully militarize, they will begin pushing back against Indonesia in certain fronts. India first pushes back against Indonesia in the Indian subcontinent, where they are able to push back quite a lot of Indonesia's gains at the beginning of the war, even gaining back their puppet's capital and pushing them fully out of Bangladesh. But before India can fully push Indonesia out of their colony in Odisha, the Rajkot country will enter in on the war on Indonesia's side, attacking India's northern puppet state and even taking their capital. In Mozambique, Indonesian troops are still not advancing much, as Mozambique's and India's use of guerrilla warfare is very effective and tons of Indonesian troops are dying only to get just a sliver of land in Africa. Luckily for Indonesia, other fronts seem to be going wildly in their favor, such as the Australian front line, which is collapsing thanks to India deciding that it would be too hard to hold and retreating most of their soldiers from the continent and putting them on the front with Indonesia in India. Another front where Indonesia's alliance is winning is the front with the Rajkot country and India, as the Rajkot country invades more of India's puppet state and even into India themselves, even taking a major city. But once India and Bangladesh's main troops arrive, they are able to somewhat kick them back. Persia, attempting to help their allies, will make a naval landing on the Rajkot country, but even after it goes well at first, their landing is eventually kicked out, which is a pretty big loss for Persia, as a lot of their best soldiers were used in the landing. But even with this parallelogram victory, one of the worst things that could happen for Indonesia would, as China and their alliance, which had been enemies with Indonesia for a long time, would finally enter the war on India's side. The first thing China does after entering the war is starting an invasion into South China, which will go pretty good for them, but they won't capitulate them completely. However, even with China entering the war, Indonesia will still be able to push India out of Australia, and even worse for India is the fact that they will attempt to evacuate their troops from the continent, but they will fail miserably. Even worse for India is the fact that Qatar, seeing that India is losing, will join World War I on Indonesia's side faster and quickly start invading into both Somalia and India, hoping to kick them out of Arabia. Even with this happening, India will be able to do a small push back in the Indian subcontinent. But even if they're pushing back in India, they're still losing in every other front in the war, like in Mozambique, where Indonesia, even after losing tons of soldiers, is eventually able to take Mozambique's capital, which basically kicks them out of the war, as their government is taken over by India to prevent them from collapsing. And soon, India will realize that this isn't even the worst it can get, as East China's alliance will join the war and immediately blitz into Bangladesh and even China's alliance. On the Bengal front, we see East China, Myanmar and Vietnam all push into Bangladesh, pushing them fully out of their eastern territories and breaking any sense of morale Bangladesh troops have left. China is eventually able to push East China out of most of their territory, but they lose a lot of their gains in South China while doing this. Beijing, with Chinese help, is able to do this too, but a big problem for them is Korea, who fully capitulates South Sakhalin and is almost able to capture Beijing's capital. Persia, deciding that they need to help India more, decides to invade Pakistan in hopes of going through them and helping India, but after they do this, both Mesopotamia and the UAE will join the war in hopes of stopping Persia from expanding. Mesopotamia and the UAE joining the war will also give Qatar the last little push they need to push both India and Somalia out of the Arabian Peninsula, as India decides to even redraw their navy from Arabia. India's colony in Africa, after seeing Mozambique fall, will revolt and kick the Indians out of mainland Africa, and soon after India will also be kicked out from Madagascar too. In Somalia, Indonesia will fully kick them out of their territory and begin blitzing Somalia till they eventually decide to surrender to Indonesia. The Diamond Alliance, after seeing that Indonesia has basically won the war already, will join the war too, meaning that India has basically fully lost now. In the Indian subcontinent, we see India be pushed in from all sides, till eventually their people can't take it anymore and communist revolts start all over India, eventually fully taking them over. India's alliance, seeing that India is now out of the war, will file for peace, leaving only China's alliance left fighting, but even China, after being pushed in and their Japanese colony revolting, will leave the war, meaning that Indonesia has won World War I. So, let's take a look at the peace treaty. In India we see both Indonesia and the Rajkot country gain a lot of land. Along with this we see Indonesia gain a new puppet in India, and Bangladesh's puppet will be released and join Indonesia's alliance. In Bangladesh, East China, Myanmar and Vietnam will all gain land. We also see a new East Chinese puppet be formed. In China, East China, South China and Taiwan will all gain a lot of land. Korea also annexes South Sakhalin and gains a lot of land from Beijing. In Beijing we also see a new East Chinese puppet be formed, and Tokyo will also be given independence and will join Indonesia's alliance. In Africa we see Indonesia take a lot of land from Mozambique. They will also annex Madagascar, and India's colony will become independent and join Indonesia's alliance. Meanwhile, Somalia will lose some of their southern land and their colony in Arabia will be given independence just like India's colony. Also, both Qatar and the UAE will both be gaining land. Persia will be heavily punished for the war, as Mesopotamia, Qatar, the UAE and Pakistan will all be taking land from them, and if this wasn't enough, Persia will then be split up into 3 countries to make sure they won't cause any problems ever again. China's colony in South America will become independent and then be forced to join Indonesia's alliance. And finally, in Australia we will be seeing India's colony become independent and join the parallelograms. But probably the biggest thing that happens in the peace treaty is that both the Triangle and Circle alliances no longer exist, and even more worrying for the world is that India has now turned communist, meaning that in the future we might see the world be even more dominated by communism than our own one. But anyways, thank you guys for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you guys want me to, I can actually make a part 2 to this video exploring the world after the First World War. But for now, goodbye.